Okay, so before we start animating, I forgot to do one thing in the last video, and that was to name things appropriately in the outliner. So I'm going to go ahead and just go through and do that. Ground, ball, box, and cylinder. Oh, looks like the names conflict with the materials, right? Well, that's fine, whatever. Close the hypershade. And so now we're going to start setting keyframes, and keyframes are how Maya makes things move. I think we've already, the intro video that I had you guys do covered those. So I've got my primitives back here at the start line. I'm going to press spacebar and go to the top view and just kind of make sure they're all kind of like touching start with so it kind of looks like, yeah, they're all just behind the line. And I'm just pressing spacebar to move in and out of the different views. Get perspective view back. All right, so setting a keyframe, there's a couple of ways of doing it. So I can select my sphere and press S, and that will set a keyframe. See those red ticks in the channel box? That means there's a keyframe. These little yellow dots down here in our curve editor, those are keyframes. I'm going to undo that. I can select the channels specifically that I want to keyframe. So on the sphere here, I'm going to be moving him in just one direction. So I don't need to set a keyframe on everything, right? In fact, it's easier if I don't, because I'm not generating all that data that I'd have to look at down in my graph editor. So I can just select by left clicking the translate X there, right click, key selected, and that will put a keyframe just on the translate X. Another way is you can key a whole section of the transform with the hotkey. So the hotkey for going into like move, rotate, and scale. So like W is translate, E rotate, R scale. So I'm back on move right now. If I press Shift W, that will key all of the translate attributes. That can be handy if you're working with a character or a more complex rig where you're trying to key the entire movement, but you don't want to key the rotation, and you don't want to put a keyframe on everything, but you want to put a key on 3 of these. So instead of coming up to the channel box, selecting all 3, and then doing key selected, you can just do, Shift W, Shift E, and Shift R will very quickly set keyframes on all 3 of the transformation attributes of the tool that you're using the corresponding hotkey for. So for this, we're going to just kind of use the right-click method up here because it will generate the least amount of data. So just to kind of show you real quick on why we're going to do that, I'm going to set a keyframe at 1, and just watch this part. You don't have to follow along. And then set one all the way over here. And as you can see, like I've got, the navigation in the graph editor is identical to the navigation in the Maya viewport. So it doesn't really need much explanation. Other than that, it's a 2D view, so obviously you can't rotate around, right? That doesn't work, but zooming in and panning work just fine. But as you can see, like I have keyframe data for all of these, and the only thing I'm going to be animating for this little exercise is the translate X. So I don't want to be generating data for all of these, so that's why we're not gonna use the S hotkey or the Shift W, Shift E, and Shift R. We're just going to use the channel box method. Right? So to start with, I'm going to select all 3 of these primitives, left click the translate X attribute in the attribute editor, and then right click, key selected. And if I go down here and look, I should have a key. There it is, that little orange dot. I'm using, so this is kind of like the outliner, like it lets you select the object of this portion of the graph editor, and then whatever any attribute that has a key on it will appear below it, and you can see that the attributes are color coded. So the translate X is red, right? So red corresponds to X, green corresponds to Y, and blue corresponds to Z. So if I'm just going to go ahead and set a key all on the ground here, and you see that these are all corresponding to X, Y, and Z. So when you're down here and you're looking, you'll see red, you'll have a red curve and you'll have a green curve, and that way you can very quickly separate, what attribute is on, or which axis of the attribute you're working on visually. So that's one of the nice things about Maya, is that a lot of these things they carry over. So red is always going to refer to X, blue is always going to refer to Z, and green is always going to refer to Y. So back to animating. We've got a keyframe at the start for all of our objects. And down here on the timeline, when I keyed that, we got a little red tick, right? So I hope you're following along again at this point. So the timeline, whenever you have an object that's got keyframes on it, it will tell you where in time those keys are. So I'm going to go ahead and, the default is 120, and since we're on 24 frames a second, that's a 5-second animation. That's fine for this. We're not going to change that. Scroll all the way out to 120. And I'm going to now move all of my primitives past the finish line quite a bit. And now I'm going to stagger them, right? So the primitive that I put out the furthest, I'm going to make the really loud pink one the winner, is going to be the one that wins. And the one that's furthest behind at 120 will be the loser, the one who does not win the race. Or I should say last place, because I guess second place is the first to lose. All right, so I've selected all 3 of my primitives again, and I can do that in the outliner as well. Oh wait, how did those guys get grouped? All right, never mind, they're not grouped anymore. And then left click on the translate attribute, right click, key selected. And on these playback controls right here, I'm going to rewind to the beginning. I'm going to deselect the primitive there and hit play. And there we've got a little foot race. Now if your playback didn't go quite like that, if your playback looked more like, let's see, like this, right? This is completely unreadable. So this is, I think that's the default setting. So playback speed, play every frame free. That plays back the animation as fast as your computer can possibly do it, which is a little unrealistic. So I think the best the best choice for this is to set your playback speed to real time, which will basically lock it at 24 frames a second. It will play back just at that speed. All right. So we've got 3 primitives that are moving at 3 different speeds, but they all have sort of the same velocity of how they get off the ground here. So I'm going to stop this. All right. So now if I've selected my ball here, and you can see I've got this nice little line going, making this curve, right? So this is showing how my X value is changing, my translate X is changing over time. The vertical axis right here, going up and down, corresponds to the value in the attribute box. So if I drag a marquee around my keyframe here, I get this value here. So I've got right here, it says stats. That's keyframe. That's where the keyframe is set. It's at 1. The value it's set to is 4.676. If I look up here in my channel box, I see the value of 4.676. So a lot of the data that you're going to be looking at in here is actually replicated in other parts of Maya. It's just showing it to you in a new context that makes more sense for animation. All right, so let's see who wound up. So our box wound up losing the race. So I'm going to really exaggerate his loss. So I'm going to select him, and we're going to make him just take forever to get off the line. So I want to select my keyframe here, and when I do that, I get these two new handles, right? And if you look at the curve here, for our horizontal axis depicting time, shows us that we're not really moving very much initially. Like it doesn't look like he even moves at all on frame 2. He just kind of sits there, which is interesting. So let's exaggerate that. So I'm going to select this keyframe, and I get these little handles here, and those are called tangents. And you can edit them. You can just draw a marquee around them, and then using the middle mouse button, you can move them up and down. Right, so you can see like the box is moving, the keyframe isn't going anywhere. It's just the tangent. The way the tangents sort of control how the data gets interpolated from one keyframe to the next. So even though I'm not setting any keyframes up this far, or I'll just have to zoom way out to see what that's doing. So yeah, just sit back and watch this part here. He backs way out and then goes boom like that. Like, I mean, you could kind of consider that anticipation a little bit, and we'll do that later in the semester. But yeah, I didn't add any extra keyframes. All I did was change the interpolation of how the existing keyframes get from one to the other. And that's what these tangent handles let you do. I can also change the default interpolation mode. So I'm going to select these two keyframes, and then I'm going to go to tangents, and I'm going to select linear here. And that's going to change this to a straight line. So when I'm going to deselect now and get a little closer. When I press play, the box moves at a perfectly even rate between the first keyframe and the last keyframe. And you can see, and like, you should try this yourself. Just, you know, set the keyframe, the tangent to linear. I'll do that again. So on the box here, I just selected these two keyframes, tangent, linear, and do that for your other two as well. Set those to linear and linear, and deselect and hit play, and just watch. They're moving at the perfectly even rate, and they come to an immediate stop. Oops. Just once. All right. Yeah, I'm clicking this little button down here to change how it plays back. So by default, it's set to start it over again immediately after it finishes, or play it in reverse. So there's you'll see a little 1 over there, meaning it just plays back once, and that gives us a better idea of what the interpolation is doing. So as you can see, it's like once the animation ends, it's like our primitives they hit a wall. All right. So we're actually going to work from this and build up the anticipation from, or not the anticipation, but the ease in and slow in from this linear state here. So let's start with our box. See, I've got a tangent now. Like, instead, the old tangents, this is just for contrast, so you can follow along this part if you want. I'm going to go back to auto, right? You see how the tangent follows off here, and it creates this fall off when it's on auto. When I change it to linear, the tangent breaks and it follows perfectly along the line. So let's work with this tangent. So I'm going to change the tangent to a weighted tangent. Sorry, let's see here. I'm going to left marquee select the keyframe, right click, and select weighted tangent. And what this will let me do is adjust the length of the tangent. The other thing I want to do is, like, if you noticed here, just back beyond the shaded point, which is outside of the timeline, the tangent is moving in correspondence with what I'm doing. So in order to stop that behavior, because you don't necessarily want that, it doesn't really affect this one, but I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to choose break tangents. So now when I move it, that other one doesn't follow along. All right, so we want this cube, since he's the loser of the race, I'm grabbing the little time indicator here and I'm scrubbing. Just kind of like you would do in Premiere or After Effects. I think I don't really use those programs very much. I'm scrubbing and I'm like, okay, well, I want this cube, since he's kind of the loser of the race, I kind of want him to hang back quite a bit. So I'm going to make his getting off the line take a little bit longer. So let's select my keyframe by dragging a marquee with left click around it, and I find the end grade dot, which is way down here. I know these are kind of hard to see, but bear with it. Then I drag a marquee around the handle tip, and then use the middle mouse button, click and drag that up, and I'm kind of keeping it parallel with the key here so that I kind of get this straight dotted line. And now my box is much slower off the start line than the other primitives are. That looks much better. Let's go ahead and play that. All right, and the reason that that's looking slower is because we're making it take more frames for him to get started. And we can adjust the speed at which this happens, all right? So if you look here, we've got, this is our value of where the box is actually sitting in space. He's at 4.6 right now. And at frame 3, he's still at 4.6. Oh, well, he's moved a little bit. He's at 4.06. So in 2 frames, he's moved a very little amount. And as I scrub through, I'm watching this right here. It's just, he just takes so long to get off the line. And we can see that here because this is the time going forward. This is the value of what X is at. And initially, his translate X is not changing very much over time as the frames go on. And then he kind of gets going here, and as our line starts to get steeper, we start to get more change over X over a similar amount of frames, right? So we've got 2 frames here, and we're getting a tenth of a unit on X of change compared to at the beginning, where we're getting like 3/1000ths of a change. So he's moving several orders of magnitude quicker as the time goes on. So all we did was by moving this handle up and out, we were changing how many frames it took to get off the line. And I can also I can grab this handle and I can move it in closer, and you can see that the line is slowly starting to start earlier, right? So it's not dragging as much. By pulling it in closer, I'm changing how long he sits there at that front line. He starts moving earlier. We still have some lag there. I'm going to go ahead and play that. So yeah, he still kind of gets going, but it's not quite as exaggerated, right? Since he's the loser, I really want to exaggerate his loss, right? That's another one of those principles. So I'm going to drag this out. You see, like it's very subtle, but this line, as the flatter this red line is, the less change there is, the slower things are going. So if I drag, like really exaggerate it, like this, all right, he's basically going to be sitting at the start line for a good portion of the animation, and then slowly pick up speed, and then really hammer the speed, and then cross the finish line. So he'll look like he's really fast. Here we go. Oh, it's like, oh, I just finally got going. That's like, as if like he was a rocket or something heavy trying to break physical barriers. But yeah, we're not adding any keyframes. We're just editing the existing first keyframe. So I'm going to bring this back to something a little more reasonable. And okay, here he goes, like, I'm going fast, and then he stops. I think he stops a little too suddenly. So I'm going to select the end keyframe, right click, break the tangents like I did last time, right click again, and weight the tangents. Then with that key, once again, select that keyframe, still selected, drag another marquee around the tangent handle, drag it down so it flattens out a little bit. There he goes. All right, so one thing I want to watch is I want to make sure that he doesn't actually start slowing down as he crosses the finish line. I want to make sure that as he's crossing the finish line, he's still got momentum. So his rate of change as he crosses the finish line should still be pretty severe. Should be pretty steep as he's going across. And I think it's a little flat. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to select this end keyframe, and then with the middle mouse, I'm going to press shift, then press middle mouse, and I've got the move tool selected. So that's another thing, is in order to move keyframes around, you need to have the move tool selected in Maya. I'm going to press shift, press the middle mouse with the move tool selected, and then I'm going to drag this down. And if it doesn't work the first time, just try it again. All right, so that will make him cross the finish line. Oh, look at that. He's now the winner. Interesting. All right, so I want to be careful about how I do that. Maybe that's too much. If I want to keep the cube the winner, I'm going to move the time slider to where the cube, or sorry, not the cube, but keep the cylinder the winner. I'm going to move the time slider to where the win is happening. I'm going to select this keyframe here, select the handle, and I'm going to pull the tangent. Okay, so that will make him come to a real sudden stop, right? So I'm decreasing the number of frames that it takes for him to come to a stop. That's not what I want to do. I want to shift, middle mouse click, and drag this keyframe up again so that he still comes in behind. The sphere. All right, so this is kind of where he's lost, right? So he's like, okay, well, there's really not much point in trying anymore. So I'm going to select this handle here, and I'm going to push it out all the way here, and that's going to make him slow down, right? So what I'm trying to communicate is like, oh, well, I've lost the race completely. I'm last place. I'm not really going to try very much more. So I've got this tangent selected just by drawing a marquee around the little box here. Shift and then dragging with the middle mouse button like so. Oh, wait, never mind. That pulled him out in front of the... But he comes to a stop. Nice. He's going... Okay, he goes... And then he slows. Okay, in order to make that work really well, I think I need to edit the ball more. Let's do him. So he's got linear tangents as well. So let's go ahead, select his keyframe, break tangent, weight the tangent, draw a marquee around the tangent, lift that up, just to get a start. Do the same over here, break tangent, weight tangent, draw a marquee around it, drag it down. All right, now let's play that and see how the race turns out. There we go. By weighting the tangent of the ball, the cube is no longer a contender, but now the ball is winning. So let's go ahead and let's weight the cylinder. Break tangent, weight tangent. Do that to the end here real quick. Break tangent, weight tangent, and that's from the right-click menu. Drag that up. Drag that down so that it literally eases into the value. That's the middle mouse button again with the move tool selected. I'm going to deselect all that so I can just see. All right, so the cylinder still wins, but the ball puts up more of a fight. Now, with the hierarchy of how we want the race to wind up reestablished, let's go back in and start editing the tangents more. So I really want this box to just give up once the ball has crossed. So I'm going to just drag this down a little bit more. So it's like he's gonna make an effort. He's gonna try, but nope. So while he's the last to cross the finish line, he's the first to come to a stop, right? Oh, there's a little bit. Okay, you see that little wobble there? That's something we got to watch out for. So I'm gonna just scrub back and forth. You see that? That's because I've pulled the tangent down just a little bit too far. If I zoom in really tight here, we can see that ever so slightly he gets below. So he goes a little bit further, then comes to a stop. So we can fix that just by dragging this down a tiny bit more. No, that didn't really fix that. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to raise the tangent up a little bit. Select it again. Yeah, you do not want wobble. Back a little bit more. So the box is really slow to get started. So slow to get started. Build some momentum, it just wasn't enough. I really want to try and get him to stop before the others do. So I'm kind of happy with how he comes to a rest, so I'm gonna edit these. Let's do the cylinder next. So to really drive the cylinder being the winner here, I'm going to reduce the amount of time it takes for him to get going. And I'm going to do that by pulling this in. It will make the curve start to slope sooner. This flat part where he's not doing much is going to get shorter. So I want the curve to really stop holding at around frame 4. So by doing this right here, he's got a little bit of ease into it, but not nearly as much as the others. All right, now let's do the balls. I think I kind of like how the balls ease in is working. It's a little even. I'm gonna lengthen it a little bit. I'm going to increase his, oops. So what happened there was I selected the keyframe, and then I thought I grabbed the tangent, but I didn't, right? So you want to be very careful there. You have to select a keyframe, then you can select its tangent. And then shift, drag that back a little bit. I'm trying to really get him to kind of overshoot the cylinder after the cylinder has crossed the finish line. So it's like after he's lost the race, he suddenly gets this burst. We'll make him just kind of barely lose. All right. Now let's see if we can really drag and exaggerate the box's sense of defeat. All right, so instead of having the box end at frame 20 like the rest of them, I'm going to move his end a few frames earlier. So you're just kind of like, I'm done. And I'm doing that just by selecting the keyframe and then press shift first to constrain it to one axis, and then drag it to the left. You can do it vertically too, so I can press shift, constrain to one axis, and then drag down and up. I don't want to go down and up right now. All right, let's play that back and see how we're looking. Oh, wait, whoops, I made him win. That wasn't supposed to happen. And the reason that he won is because I changed too quickly how he crosses the finish line. I wasn't watching the whole animation when I was making edits, right? So it's very easy to screw up the animation. Making edits in the dark. So let's see, let's make him, let's just try it 117. He shouldn't. All right. Gonna slowly, okay, yep. Cylinder still wins. Scrub it through. Just watching it a few times. All right. I think I'm going to speed up the cylinder just a tiny bit here. And to do that, I'm going to move the point where he crosses the finish line earlier in the animation. On the box, I'm going to actually do the opposite. So as I brought it back instead of forward, I should have extended it further outside the range of the animation. So I'm going to need to compensate the length of the animation a little bit more, I think. So let's see here. I'm going to frame 127, and just down here in this first field, I'm going to type 127. There. That winds up looking a little better, I think. It was getting a little too busy as far as all of the objects being lined up. It was right before the finish line, and I just needed a few more frames at the end there. All right. So the next thing is a camera angle. So we got to decide what would be the best camera angle, and that's going to be up to you, because that's going to, since you're going to have different primitives and you're going to have different ones that win and different ones that lose, it's up to you to kind of decide which is the best way to go there. So I want you to pick a good camera angle that you think reinforces the results of the race, and play blast that. And I'll go over the play blast here in the next video. But I don't want to see anything like this. All right. This is boring. Okay. I don't want to see anything like this. Don't turn anything like this out. I can't see what happens, right? I want you to pick a camera angle that creates clarity and as much visual interest as you possibly can for what this scene is, right? I know this isn't an exciting scene, so I'm not expecting, any Academy Award-winning cinematography or anything, but try to make it look as interesting as you can with a camera angle choice.